Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today, especially if you're the kind of person who's always looking to sharpen your strategic edge. Okay, so today we're diving deep into a massive blind spot in business strategy. You know how it goes, right? We spend so much time totally obsessed with our direct competitors, the ones matching us feature for feature, price drop for price drop. But what happens when the real danger isn't even playing by those rules at all? Let's uncover the hidden threat of substitutes. Seriously, think about that for a second. What if your biggest competitor isn't even in your industry? It's kind of jarring, isn't it? But man, this is an incredible strategic trap that seasoned business leaders fall into time and time again. They hyper-focus only on their direct rivals, kind of acting like competition only happens among the established players in their specific little bubble. But the fight for profits, it goes way beyond that. It completely bleeds across industry lines. If you're only watching the competitor across the street, you are totally missing the one coming at you from an entirely different direction. Section 1, the 5 forces ecosystem. Okay, let's dive into this by taking a step back and looking at the broader macro environment of competitive pressures. This brings us to a classic, totally essential framework from our source material. You're probably familiar with the ecosystem created by Michael Porter, Porter's 5 forces. Competitive rivalry is right smack in the center. That's the noisy, everyday battle for market share we all know. But notice all the other forces surrounding it. We've got the threat of new entrants, the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers, and, down at the bottom, the main focus of our explainer today, the threat of substitute products. It's just one single force, but make no mistake, it has the power to completely upend that central rivalry and dictate the ultimate profitability of the entire industry ecosystem. Moving to Section 2, the blind spot, defining the substitute threat. We need to clearly define the crucial difference between a competitor you can easily see and one you can't. So the real aha moment here is understanding the difference between a rival and a substitute. A rival offers a really similar product. Think Coke versus Pepsi or Toyota versus Nissan. That's traditional brand and industry competition. But a substitute performs the exact same function or satisfies the exact same basic customer need, but it often looks completely different. It's not Pepsi versus Coke, it's Pepsi versus bottled water. Both totally quench your thirst, but they come from entirely different industries. It's not choosing between a Toyota and a Nissan, it's choosing between driving a car and taking the train, or even riding a bicycle. The underlying need is transportation, but the actual forms, they're completely distinct. And this brilliantly illustrates just how devastating this dynamic can actually be. Just think about these historical and ongoing battles. The internet didn't just compete with video stores, it absolutely devastated them. NutraSweet and Stevia are waging this silent war against the sugar industry. Video conferencing software, that acts as a massive substitute for business travel and the airline industry. Email completely substituted physical mail. Plastic manufacturers are constantly pressuring aluminum producers in the packaging space. These aren't just companies stealing a few measly market share points. These are entirely different industries satisfying the same human needs, faster, cheaper, or just plain better. Section 3, the mechanics, drivers of substitute power. Now that we know what these substitutes look like, let's shift into investigation mode. Why, and more importantly, when do these alternative products become truly deadly to an industry's profitability? Well, it all comes down to an invisible barrier called the price ceiling. The existence of close substitutes naturally limits an industry's potential returns. How? By putting a hard lid, literally a ceiling, on the prices firms can profitably charge. Think about it like this. If the price of coffee rises way too high, you might love your morning roast, but eventually you're just going to switch to tea. Because tea satisfies that exact same basic need for a warm, caffeinated morning beverage, the price of tea actually dictates how much coffee producers can charge before they trigger a mass exodus of their customers. According to our source texts, competitive pressures from substitutes are at their absolute strongest when 3 specific conditions are met. First, the substitute is readily available and attractively priced. Second, buyers view that substitute as having comparable or maybe even better performance, features, or quality. And third, and honestly, this is the real kicker, the costs for the buyer to switch to the substitute are low. If a hospital can easily switch from an expensive, branded proprietary drug to a generic one without compromising patient care or spending a fortune to change their systems, well, that low switching cost makes the generic substitute an incredibly deadly threat. Let me share a fascinating, highly specific example from the source material that perfectly quantifies this performance-to-price ratio. Imagine traveling between Washington and New York. Let's say flying takes exactly 50 minutes less than taking the train. Now, if the average business traveler values their time at, say, $30 an hour, that 50 minutes saved by flying has a very precise financial value, exactly $25. So what does that mean for the train company? It means the train is only a competitive substitute if its fare is priced at least $25 cheaper than the airline ticket. If it's not, the airline wins the value proposition every single time. That $30 metric directly defines the pricing boundary between two entirely different industries. Mind-blowing, right?
This brings us to a term that, honestly, sounds like pure business school jargon, but it is deeply, deeply practical: cross-price elasticity. Now, don't let the term scare you. All this means is measuring the percentage change in demand for one good when there's a 1% change in the price of another good. That's it. If the price of long-distance internet phone services drops by just 1% and traditional telecom providers suddenly see a noticeable drop in their own demand, well, that high cross-price elasticity proves you've got a fierce substitute breathing right down your neck. It's basically the mathematical pulse of the substitute threat.
Section 4, the symptoms and defense. Okay, so we know what substitutes are, and we know the mechanics of why they work. Let's move to our final section. How can operators and strategists actually spot this invisible threat before it eats their market share? And more importantly, how do you defend against it? Now, what's really interesting here is the checklist for diagnosing this stuff. If you're a manager, these are your big warning signs. You can't just look at your own industry's growth anymore. You have to look sideways. Ask yourself, is the sales trajectory of an alternative product growing faster than yours? Are the producers of those alternative products actively investing money to add new capacity? And finally, are the profits of those alternative producers rising while yours are just stagnating? If you check these three boxes, the substitute is gaining ground fast and your industry is losing its relevance. But hey, you are not powerless here. You can totally defend your market boundaries. The source materials lay out a few direct strategies to ward off these substitutes. First up, you have to relentlessly enhance your product's performance to improve its relative value. Basically, make your product definitively better than the substitute. Second, step up your marketing to really reinforce that brand loyalty and highlight your unique benefits. Third, you might just have to adjust your pricing or offer strategic discounts to completely wipe out the substitute's price advantage. And finally, you can reconstruct market boundaries altogether. Innovate. Find new functions and new utilities for your product that the substitute simply cannot match. You literally have to change the rules of the game. Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the focus learner. Take a really hard look at the business you operate in or the industry you're currently studying. I want you to stop looking at your direct rivals for just 1 minute. Ask yourself, what is the most dangerous invisible substitute in your own industry today? What entirely different product or service is out there quietly satisfying your customers' exact needs? You need to identify it before it dictates your prices, or worse, makes you completely obsolete. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep your eyes on the entire competitive board. Catch you next time.